welcome back to Shoogly Shed Motors. Today I'm going to begin detailing the VMAX engine. Well, what do I mean by detailing? Well, obviously this engine needs a proper degrease and clean, and then we're going to give it a few coats of new paint. I said previously this engine has been running great. There's no real reason to tear it apart. If it broke, don't fix it. So that's kind of my philosophy here. I'm going to try my best to mask off absolutely everything that I don't want to paint, and then give this thing a whole going over, degreasing and spraying. Yes, okay, it's not ideal. It's not probably the best way to do it, but without stripping the engine down, there's no real other way to do this. We are going to get the valve covers coated separately. They actually work quite well to sort of mask off the valve, the sort of top of the engine anyway. So don't really mind if I get overspray on them. They're going to get stripped and coated elsewhere. Obviously I've got quite a lot of water galleyways and things like that need plugged up and masked off. I need to remove some of these coolant pipes. And then the big thing is the sort of V-boost unit in the middle here. The way the V-boost kind of works is there's the intake sort of manifolds here, there's butterfly valves on each one, and this little cable popped out there. And this little cable is operated by a little electronic box, and I think when it reaches a certain rev range, it pulls that cable and opens up those butterfly valves. So effectively joining up all the manifolds. So I'm not entirely sure. I think it's just it can increase fuel flow or efficiency or something like that. I'm sure you can read up on it if you're that interested. But basically it's a very complicated and delicate setup, and I don't really want to remove it if I can avoid it. So I'm hoping to try and mask all that off. Yeah, like I say, just to avoid any damage to it, or messing up the settings at all. So that's what I'm going to try and do with this, is clean it all, mask it, and then paint it all in one. Yeah, might as well just get the degreaser out and the masking tape and get on with this. That's the engine degreased, dusted off. I've done lots of sanding as well of some rough bits, smoothed everything off, masked off everything that I want to obviously protect from paint, and anything that's not masked off will be getting replaced. Things like the oil filter and that kind of thing will all be getting changed. So that's just as good as anything for masking off that area and those threads, so I'm just going to leave those in place. Going to give it a full coat of paint. One other thing to point out is that the engine bolts are all getting changed to shiny new ones. Someone that actually has a bit of a labour of love has sprayed this engine at some point before and has gone round the bolts with a very fine paintbrush and some silver paint and painted just the lip of all the bolts, which looks quite good from afar, but the closer you look, doesn't look great. Anyway, it's going to get totally resprayed now. Couple of coats, let it harden, and then I'll flat it back a bit, and then a few top coats as well. Right, it's the next day and the engine is dry. Quite a few imperfections, just typical first couple coats of paint always the way. So I'm going to go over it with some sandpaper, just some very fine grit stuff, sort out the imperfections and then begin on top coats. It's quite chilly today, it's kind of feeling quite autumnal, so not the ideal temperature for painting really, so I'm going to get the heat gun out and warm the metal off a bit before I get any more paint on it. But hopefully I'll warm myself up by doing some sanding. Well, that's the engine sort of sprayed up. I think that's all the top coats done now. Anything else will just be touch-ups. Like I said earlier, the valve covers will be getting taken off and coated elsewhere, so I don't want any comments about how I missed the valve covers. A couple of wee things for painting engines, kind of on your own. It's really handy to have it on an adjustable height stand, like I've got it on my bike lift here, purely because you can raise it right up to the height that you want to work at, and you can get like painting right underneath the engine, which is an area a lot of people miss. And obviously it's not an area of the engine that will be seen very often, but if you're planning on taking your bike to meets and shows and things like that, there will be a few folk that will get down on their hands and knees and have a wee look under your engine, because that is the giveaway of your finishing. But yeah, so an adjustable height is great because you can raise it up, get right underneath, and then even drop it right down and get over the top of it to kind of get into the parts that you kind of miss from side on spraying. Sometimes you sort of top down a wee bit. Also, you have to remember that like the engine is encased in the frame and there's loads of other parts obviously all over it, so don't get too hung up on like the perfect paint finish on parts that you need like a torch and a mirror to actually see. Just make sure it all gets a good coating and it's going to adhere well, and really concentrate on like the nice finishing on the engine casings and the side of the engine in particular, because that's the part that's more on show. Just like a kind of better use of your time, but you know, you could spend forever painting engines to make them look absolutely immaculate. But you know, best use of your time, I think, is to try and get a good finish overall, and then really perfect that finish on like the sides of the engine, which are the parts that will be seen the most. And like I say, anyone going with a fine tooth comb will at least see that you have coated the whole thing and there's not big rusty oily patches that you've missed. So the last things I've got to do to the engine really are get the valve covers obviously off and coated, and then I've got loads of new hardware to go on the engine. As mentioned earlier, that's why I've left all the hardware in place, because it works quite well just to mask off areas for me. So I've got loads of new bolts to go on it, there's new finishing like rubbers and clips and stuff to replace. That's why it looks like I've just kind of sprayed over a lot of stuff, and I have. That's because a lot of it's just coming off, and there's no better masking tape than the actual part in place. So that's where I'm going to wrap part 1 on spraying the engine. I've got so much stuff to be getting on with on this bike, but Shoogly does need a rest now and then. There will be a little bit of radio silence while I enjoy some time off. But hopefully I'm kind of going to try and get my nose down and work getting parts off to coaters and painters and things like that for the sort of specialist coatings and paint. I don't think I've got any other kind of major projecty stuff to do other than reassembly. Like spraying the engine was quite a big job, and then aside from that, yeah, it's just kind of respraying and cleaning and rebuilding lots of little fiddly parts, brake calipers and stuff like that. The forks, I've just started stripping down. There will be a video on them. Yeah, aside from that, I'm kind of pleased with how the progress is going with this bike. As I've said before, this is the most enjoyable part of building a bike, is actually starting to put it back together and seeing all the finishing touches and the paint and the powder coat and the chrome and the there's no chrome on this bike, but anodizing and stuff, all these different coatings we're getting done, bringing all your hard work and your fabrication work back to life. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing something that you've kind of crafted out of like raw steel into a finished, painted, polished part. Yeah, that's, at least I get quite big satisfaction from that. Anyway, I'm just rambling. I think it's the paint fumes. Should probably go out, just get some fresh air. As usual, please do give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you do subscribe to the Shoogly Shed channel. I appreciate all the support. I will see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.